Radio, we're just on the hour now, so maybe I'll just kick off. We have a good few participants coming in, so just to thank everyone firstly for registering and kind of get into some of the housekeeping for the discussion. So everyone's on mute, so if you have any questions, drop them into the questions tab below, and if we have time at the end, we'll get to them. This discussion, this webinar is being recorded, and you will get a copy of the recording after the webinar. So now just to get into a kind of just introduction. So I'll do the introductions for the panel, including myself and Paul. So I'm David Walsh. I'm the founder and CEO of CIM, and Paul is the GM of EMEA at CIM. And we both really share a passion for sustainability, and we're really eager to hear from the panel. I think the timing for the discussion is great. As all businesses really do face an ever-increasing the challenge of rising energy prices and ESG targets and operational cost reductions and efficiencies. So I'll introduce the panel now. So firstly, we have Dr. Ken Bruton. He's from UCC. He's a lecturer in engineering data analytics and a researcher in sustainability. And his experience spans across the industrial sector on data-driven energy efficiency. Next up is Darren Murphy. He's with CBRE, and he's account manager with CBRE, and he looks after a lot of large accounts, including the likes of Dell and VMware. And Darren has hands-on experience in running facilities and maintaining all different types of systems, including HVAC, and then going on and delivering energy-saving projects. So from Johnson & Johnson, we have Adrian McCarthy. He is Johnson & Johnson's Campus Ireland Energy Manager and Site, Facility and Utilities Engineering Lead at Depuy. So he wears two hats within the J&J organization. And Adrian leads J&J, who's a Fortune 500 manufacturing organization in their carbon neutrality journey. So thank you all for taking the time to join, and I think we'll kick off. So I think the first question that I'd like to ask the panel is, what are the major challenges to tackling sustainability, and how can site and building operators address and overcome these challenges? So firstly, I'll put that one to you, Ken. What do you think?
I suppose in the past, it's been an economic decision that people have been making about, payback is very high on the agenda for getting projects through. And I think what's changed maybe, even though we've had a turbulent couple of years with the COVID pandemic, I think people have realized indoor air quality is really, really important for a number of different reasons. And me coming from maybe a mechanical background where it was always building services were being put in, and we tried to reduce energy consumption of building services any way we could. Now people are starting to understand that it's so important that the building services are delivering a clean and comfortable, but also a really safe environment, and doing it in an energy efficient way. And that's the tough thing. We call it the nexus of energy efficiency and maybe indoor air quality, trying to get that point where you get the crossover of the right type of environment in an energy efficient way. And also doing that while keeping your CO2 as little as possible and getting it to net zero as people want to do. So a lot of the corporates, and I'm sure Adrian and Darren will both tell you in a minute, the carbon neutral paths that they're on, they're tough paths. They're going to cost a lot of money. So a lot of investment is needed. I think people are now on board. I definitely see it a lot more. I teach a lot of undergraduate students, and it's really, really important to I'm going to call them the next generation, right? That are coming out. It's first on their agenda. So when they're going into the workplace and when they're trying to impact how the future of buildings operate, it's in a sustainable way, and they'll be asking questions around, how sustainable is this company? And I think the tech world has seen that driver come in the past, but I think it's gone mainstream now, definitely. So I think economies of scale was something that was definitely there. I think that's kind of maybe past now with the way that the energy prices have gone up. I think people power has now migrated, where people now want to actually do things, and there's a realization that we have to change. You see the floods in Bangladesh lately, you see the way our weather patterns have changed. It's now mainstream, it's not fringe anymore. And I think the realization that the COVID pandemic brought about, all right, geez, these engineering systems actually affect me on a day-to-day basis. I can't go to work if it's not safe. I think that's maybe brought the final piece together to maybe enact change.
That's a great point, Ken, around the focus on a clean and comfortable environment, but delivering it with optimal kind of energy efficiency. So maybe like on that, I might just ask, it's an interesting point. And in your experience, Adrian, like how do you, as a sustainability leader, how do you see those challenges, including the likes of OPEX and whatnot?
Yeah, I think like in Johnson Johnson, I said we have aggressive renewable energy targets. So as per our carbon neutrality in our operations is by 2030. So like any investments we're making now on building new buildings, extensions, we need to be looking at this energy efficiency design and that, because if we're going to be building now for 26, 27, and then trying to retrofit is going to be a very tough challenge to meet our carbon neutrality goals for 2030. So it's getting our key stakeholders bought into that we need to invest now in our net carbon zero buildings, and we need to retrofit the buildings that we have. I suppose some of the challenges we're sort of seeing with ourselves within Campus Ireland and J&J. So we've 100% of our electricity is from renewable sources, so we've achieved that goal. And Ireland are world leaders when it comes to renewable energy for onshore, and hopefully we'll be moving to that offshore pretty soon and developing that fairly rapidly. But when it comes to the thermal loads, that's I think the biggest challenge that we're facing in Ireland, where the worst performers in the EU, I think we're only down to 6.7% for renewable sources from our thermal loads. So it's trying to get that, find that challenge, trying to find solutions to that challenge. And as we head towards 2030, that's going to be where I think we're really going to struggle. But there are some solutions coming online, but we need to sort of progress them in Ireland rapidly.
Oh, they're great points. And kind of into the next question then is, and it ties in the sense of for manufacturing and large complex buildings, like then what are the types of initiatives that are being implemented to deliver the CO2 reduction? So might just put that one to Paul, just from the HVAC energy efficiency and data analytics side of it, and really tying together that, like what he sees in that people element as well.
Yeah, so I suppose I've been fortunate enough to work in the manufacturing sector probably for 25 years now, and what I've seen work really, or what I've seen the transition is from that, you know, the big capex projects that companies have always wanted to invest in around, you know, implementing on-site generation, or, you know, installing new plant and equipment. I've seen that shift from moving away from that type of a model to getting what they have on site working better. And how I think, I suppose, data analytics plays a part in that is it essentially it empowers the people that operate the buildings to be able to act on insights that the data is already contains, but be able to distill them down into very small bite-sized chunks that empowers the facilities team to go fix those small issues that are happening across complex plant and equipment, to allow them to be able to operate at their peak performance. And just seeing that transition from a kind of a capex delay, because it's very people dependent, very slow, to a situation where, you know, software can decipher what exactly is wrong, and that can be enacted and resolved very, very quickly. So I think that's my input on that anyway, Dave.
Yeah, no, and then to you, Darren, like having been in with CBRE and how you promote new initiatives for energy and cost savings, like what are the things that you kind of get involved in and try and implement?
Yeah, so I suppose we're seeing our buildings adapt over, you know, the last number of years. You know, when COVID hit, it was, you know, straight into kind of energy consumption. It made probably us and clients more aware of the energy that we were using in the buildings. But now going forward, yeah, look, cost obviously plays a huge part in, you know, in implementing any energy efficient equipment. And as Paul touched on there, data analytics is huge for us now at the moment, to be able to monitor and measure what we currently use and you know what's projected also, but then to monitor it after as well when we install it. But I suppose what comes into that then is choosing the system, and this is where we probably rely on our vendors and our experts and energy specialists, is to give us that information and what's out there and what's being used. And you know, you'll always look at reducing over cost, like to reuse, or you know, if you had old assets removal, can you keep anything from those assets and use them? You know, what when you're getting rid of assets, it's what exactly do you have to get rid of? And then when you go into projects, I mean, look, at the moment, you know, HVAC, we saw probably over COVID was a huge energy user, whereas when we were able to turn those systems off, a couple of our sites wouldn't have had monitoring or energy monitoring in place, but you would have seen it from the bills. But if you were to take the bills as a project and look at that without the monitoring, you see the price of energy changes all the time. So sometimes you might not see the afters in the bills. So that's where I see the data as, you know, if you can break down what exactly you're using, how you're using it, and what the asset is doing, and then, you know, to be able to project that over. And I suppose the most important part at the moment, and I know machine learning is coming down the line, but the individual, I think, has an important aspect to play in the role after the project is done, because sometimes, you know, you get your capital and you get your money invested and you put in your system, and then, you know, those are normally done by contractors, so they're probably gone then on to the next project and stuff. So it's the person, the individual at the site, and, you know, I suppose people change then roles and stuff like that. So that's the important part, probably where it gets lost at times, is that, you know, buildings always change, buildings always adapt. And, you know, even just a quick example of, you know, if you have a security guard who walks around at night and you have your lighting set to 20 minutes during the day because people are in the building, and it's set at 20 minutes at night, he's walking around and the lights are on for 20 minutes, whereas he might be only in the space for a minute, you know, and it's those sort of things. And that's a very, very small example, but over a year or over 5 years, you know, imagine the consumption that you would save there.
No, I totally agree. And it's an interesting point, Darren, in the sense of there's all this talk about smart buildings and manufacturing the future, but really, I think humans and people and providing them with the right data at the right time is key to that point you made. So when like within the businesses that you're in, and even within research, so when you're developing CO2 reduction strategies, what are like the key considerations and what you term to be like best practices? I might hand that to Ken first, just for advice on kind of industry or kind of what he sees from.
Yeah. So I suppose I've been kind of tipping around this industry for maybe 20 years. And when I started out on this, I did a master's, say, 2001, and it was with Cylon Controls, part funded it, and it was about building management system integration. And I'm just amazed that it's taken us this long to get this far, right? 21 years later, and we're just starting to solve some of the problems that were there 21 years ago, and we all knew they were there, right? So you ask about, you know, sustainability and carbon neutral planning, and like data is such a big part of it. And what I see a little bit about, there's a little bit of greenwashing. There's no other way to kind of put it across, right? CPPAs are out there, and they're fine, right? They serve a purpose in terms of enacting some change, but, you know, the actual effect that they have on the addition into the market in terms of renewable is out to jury, right? Because there's multiple types of ways of accounting for that. So that was initially what people were doing. Then, you know, I have a researcher now, she's a lovely lady, and she's working in carbon neutral planning, and she's working in decarbonization strategy and tools and frameworks to help. Because what you find is that there's no real set way of doing this. There never is, right? There's what you can have a process, you can have a method, or you can have a framework. Your process is very straightforward. Your method might be a little bit more abstract. Your framework is something that you hang a number of different ideas on. And that's what carbon neutral planning. There's no simple answer. I can't tell you step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this, step 4 is this, step 5 you're carbon neutral, off you go. Here's your search, right? I'll say to you, roughly speaking, step 1 is exactly what Paul said, reduce. And we need to use our data to help people make better decisions, right? So Darren said it, we need to go in, we need people to be on board, and we need to be as efficient as we possibly can. That might take 20 different tools and elements and structures and departments and cooperation and change management, right? That's not easy. I could say to you, phase 2 of your process is we need to somehow reuse. So we need to get involved in maybe pinch analysis. We need to use waste heat recovery. We need to maximize we need to eliminate fossil fuels. We need to migrate across to the renewable grid. That's not easy. There's a lot of different ways to do that too. And that could be a multi-stage process that requires a lot of investment. Then I might say to you, right, we've reduced the chunk, we've reused what we can, and we're still left with this massive chunk. Now I need 10 million because we need to retrofit across the board. That's tough, right? Because now we're into really complex projects where we're probably having multiple new or emerging or some really standard technology that's being reused to achieve that reduction. And then we might need a little bit of offsetting at the end. And, that's tough to take as well, because you think after spending 10, 20 million, you're going to be totally neutral. But I can tell you at the moment, you probably won't. But things might change because there's a little element of unknown of what's it going to be like post 2030. Will we have a biogas injection into our grid? Will we have hydrogen? What do we do? I don't know, but we have to plan for the unknown. And I think that's sometimes where people are a bit uncertain in terms of making assumptions, driving a path forward, and being happy enough to exist in that grayness that you're not really sure what the end game looks like. But I know I can get you 80% of the way there.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Ken. And maybe over to you, Adrian, and like J&J have had an awful lot of success in this, and then kind of any kind of feedback or advice or whatever for the attendees as to what you've done to achieve that success and where the challenges were.
I think it's definitely your basics really and your energy efficiency, and I suppose this is where your ISO 50001 program will drive you towards as well. Like it's your basic energy efficiencies, looking at your significant energy uses across site, looking for opportunities around there. I think it was about 15 years ago when I first started in energy management, and I remember I used give Monday morning to myself. I used to sit in front of a BMS screen, and I was just analysing each HVAC, looking at the control dampers, looking at the valves on and off. So the digitization of that now at present, which we're getting through CAM is fantastic. We'll get notification into the inbox, and we can get our technicians to address any issues. They're sort of very basic items that will give you massive savings and a fantastic cost avoidance as well. Again, your basics of your compressed air, leakage server, and it's just to have this continuation of these services on site, and that digitalization and remote monitoring where you can really helps to drive that forward. Then I suppose it's moving towards the electrification of the heat. I suppose ISO 50001 will get us energy efficiencies and will get us carbon reduction, but it won't get us to carbon neutrality, and that's where we need to have that separate path. So electrification of the heat loads, whether it be through heat pumps for your lower thermal loads, geothermal, solar thermal, there are opportunities there. But there's still going to be these key areas at the end, whether it be steam, whether it's going to be the possibility of biomass. You have your site symbiosis or district symbiosis, and that's the complications I think where Ken was talking about there months ago, is trying to get those technologies. It's linking in, trying to get these energy parks and energy hubs within IDA industrial parks across the country. We could have sites next to each other, one dispensing heat, one looking for heat. We need to get those connections across the country, and we need to get those conversations going with our neighbours to see where we can be more energy efficient, and we can utilize heat and reuse that heat. I suggest the final piece of the puzzle is going to be those alternative energy sources. As Ken was saying, our biogas, I think the latest from SAI was in around 2.5% by 2030 injection, and there's something similar for the green hydrogen, even though it's looking to be a bit more promising. So what we're doing is we're trying to stay connected to those new companies who are developing those technologies, to try and be into that market to help them and for them to help us. I think it's going to be working as a partnership with these companies in developing this final piece of the puzzle to get to that carbon neutrality by 2030.
No, absolutely agree with you, Adrian. It is that there's no end of collaboration that's needed to get where we need to go. So just a reminder to everyone, if there's a question that has already come in, but if you have any questions, drop them into the question tab below. We'll try and get to them towards the end. And then just the fourth question is really that I have here is like, how do we get these buildings ready for that energy efficient future? So I might just ask you, Darren, for running the buildings you're running. What do you think about how we get buildings ready?
So again, I suppose lights went off there. Saving energy already on the call.
Come on, Darren.
That's it. Very good. No, I suppose you as I spoke about, using tools. Obviously, data analytics for our project to be able to measure, I suppose, and show results. Obviously, engaging with our energy specialists is big, because we're like they're the ones who are going to be in with the newest technologies, and to help us to, I suppose, decide what's needed for the building. But big one again is responsibility and ownership, and it's heavily down to the individual and the teams on site, and having that care for the site, and being able to have an input in what we change and what we adjust, because we won't always be on everything. Someone is going to come. We need to come as a team, as a group together in that way, and have suggestions and meet with our contractors. What suits your building? What's your building doing? Do many people ask that? What are the time scales? What time are people on site? What, especially now as well, what days are people on site? And what's your building using? So I think we have all these systems. You have probably BIM models coming down the line. You'll be able to log on to your building. You'll be able to see what your building's doing. We'll have a lot more sensors, a lot more monitoring, and that's the way I see it going forward in the future.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think you touched on that kind of engagement and getting the supply chain and everyone involved from right the way through, from kind of the consultants through to the HVAC technicians and the BMS technicians, because I've seen it like more accountability that's there for the different groups within it. Well, then the better the decision making can be. And then as you tie that into kind of whatever the use of the building is, let it be, let's say, a 24/7 operation, or where people are remote working, there's flexi working. It's how you end up kind of adapting the actual building to the needs of the tenant is very, very important. So so just with Ken, how do you feel on that, with what the future holds for energy efficient buildings?
Yeah, I think Darren hit the nail on the head. Like sensorization, like there's just so much more data coming in. Like I know myself, we started to look at CO2 as a proxy for kind of indoor air quality, I'm supposed to call it that. NOx and SOx sensors, just understanding what's actually going on within the buildings. And then for the building services itself, it used to be a case that the building management system, maybe took the flow rates and maybe some supply and return temperatures. And that's not really good enough anymore for what we want to achieve. So there's a lot more sensors going in AHUs. It used to be the supply temperature versus the mixed air temperature, whereas now we have off-coil, pre-coil, valve positions, everything's coming back to the BMS. Now, that's great in theory, but the issues that we have is what we do with that data and how we turn that data into actionable decision making. No, and I'm not here for the sales pitch. I know what you do, right? But I believe in this because I've been at it for 20 years, and I've seen how if you give people the right quality information, they can make much better decisions. But there's also this potential pitfall is if you give them too much information, that information gets lost. I once got blamed maybe 10 years ago for wiping out a database when I installed a bit of software to take information from it. And when I actually went in and analyzed it, it turned out they were never logging anything. For 5 years, they had a database inside in the building. This is a big commercial building. And they were just awestruck by this. They were blaming me wholeheartedly. They fully believed that this was my fault. And I said, lads, you never had that data. It was never there. So, you can put all the sensors in the world in. If you don't actually capture them in a way that's meaningful, I think schemas, naming conventions, understanding, giving context to the data, that allows future analysis, and it allows us to make better decisions around how we actually use our building. But they're all linked. Like the indoor air quality needs to be linked to the building services, needs to be linked, as Darren says, to the occupancy, because sites have changed. It's no longer 5 days a week. Everybody sit at your desk, go into the nest, into the farm, right? You're coming in a couple of days a week now at a time of your choosing. It's a requirement for people that they want remote work, so they want to come in and out, and that brings with it other problems, because you have a cyclic workforce. You've got different peaks during your day. You've got different times than you would have previously had when you now need to keep an eye on things. And then if you're looking into the distributed market, and you're saying, well, I want the virtual power plant, I want my building to be able to sell back into the grid. How's that going to work? You know, if I suddenly want to turn off my HVAC system, or I want to turn off my chiller when now I have a peak, when I didn't used to have a peak, because everybody's coming in on Tuesday at 2 to 4 because that's when we have staff barbecue. You know, it's a changing landscape, and we need to really, buildings are going to become a lot more intelligent per se, right? But they're only as intelligent as the way that we use the data that we get to make better decisions.
No, that ties in really well.
Great point.
It's a great point. It ties in. There's a question just from the attendees, which is, do you see challenges in on-site personnel interpreting building analytics in order to take the relevant actions based on the data being provided? I might hand that to you, Paul, and see like what you've seen coming from manufacturing over to the other side, I say software.
I suppose there is always a challenge around. Let me think how to correctly phrase this. A lot of times there's difficulty getting access to the data because they can be residing on proprietary systems that you might have difficult accessing the data. And then I suppose what does happen, where the magic happens, I think a lot of people have touched on it in the call, is when you give the people who are at the coalface the ability to act very specifically on a task to allow them to resolve the issue that they're being faced with. And I just think that sometimes all the sites we're across globally have gigabytes of data. It's the challenge is often distilling that down into information that they can act on. And I think that's a key part for the challenge for the on-site teams.
Yeah, I might add to it as well, in the sense that I think an awful lot of on-site teams have alarm fatigue. You know, they get technical messages when they're not a technical user. If it's fine if you have a degree in mechanical or electrical engineering or building services, but like from where we come at it, it's all about that. If you don't make the user experience for a non-technical person very easy to move an issue to the relevant person, let that be a BMS contractor or a plumber for the cooling towers or a HVAC technician, then nothing happens. So it's one thing to identify stuff, but the next thing is to make it easy for it to be resolved. So just another question that came through is around the construction side of it, which is very, very important. So how well do you think construction currently integrates with whole life and operations, i.e. beyond facility management? Sustainability issues, including net zero, circular economy activities. In line with this, does our understanding of measurement need to move beyond the current approaches? So hopefully this, to kind of paraphrase it a bit, I see the construction, like part of the kind of the challenges are in that design and construction phase. And then when you move from practical completion during that defects liability. And I think there are some challenges I might, maybe yourself, Ken, as we move that soft landing from kind of construction to defects liability to operations, like how do we need to move beyond the current approaches to get a better understanding of pre-build and then operations? So
it's a good question, and it's a tough one to actually give a coherent answer on, right? So there's a couple of approaches. Darren mentioned BIMs a while ago. So the construction industry is changing and it is digitalizing, but it's a slow change, right? So not everyone is across the board yet on using the data right the way through, from concept design through to detail, through to construction, handing over to facilities, thinking about sustainability at the concept phase, right? So you have tools that can help in terms of using data to take all the way through the construction process and to make sure that that's documented and controlled. And you have one building model which could potentially be used to actually predict what's going to happen and then produce based on that. On the other side of it, you have IS 399, which is the energy efficient design standards. So you have a method by which, if there's a new construction project or a renovation to an existing site, you can follow the EED process, whereby you're thinking about the energy service requirement and you're working your way out. And by energy service requirement, I mean, you know, if I have a construction and I have if it's a manufacturing site and I have a clean room, you know, why do I need the particular levels to be at the certain level I do? What's my room recovery rate? What am I actually doing in this room that requires me to keep this cleanliness level? And then you work your way back through the facilities to actually deliver that requirement. So you're minimizing the size of your plant by minimizing the size of your requirement. So again, that helps in bringing things through. But maybe what the real reason is it's people, right? People are and silos. So I think maybe Darren or Adrian mentioned about the handovers between different stages. So there is a 4-stage commissioning process. You come in, you do your first stage commissioning, you make sure all the inputs and outputs line up and that it's working as you said it was, and then you hand over to the next person who takes ownership of the building, and they do their bit of operation. They make sure they try and do their maintenance practices to make sure that things are operating well, and they may need a retro commission to get it back to where it should have been first day. So if that handover isn't done in an efficient way, and by that I mean it needs to be documented, it needs to be agreed, it needs to be part of the contract. We may need performance contracting to emphasize that. And that's obviously coming in a lot more, making sure that people are on the hook really, because too much and too often I find manuals, like very often on sites, sitting up on top of the equipment that, you know, paper-based manuals that no one ever looks at, or there's not a proper handover folder of all of the equipment. I find with even something as simple as a metering system, I've seen metering systems go in, wireless metering systems, and there's no actual schematic of where any of the meters are. So no one can find them afterwards. So if something happens, they don't know which meter is located in which electrical cabinet goes to, which gateway it goes to, what's the name of that actual, the tag that goes all the way back through to the system. So people are like, you can put in your building information model, you can ensure the data is correct and it carries through. You can follow IS 399, you can have a system and a process. But if the people aren't on board to follow those processes and not to kind of circumvent them in other ways, that's the bit that maybe needs to change. But like I said, things are changing where people are now understanding the importance of an effective handover, and performance contracting puts something in there where it's a case of, you know, this needs to be operating at a certain level for a certain time. And I understand why, and I'm willing to pay 10% extra to make sure I'm going to get a proper life cycle cost of this and not just get a cheap early installation. So I think value engineering is something that's starting maybe to not be as important as it once was, and it's more maybe sustainable value engineering now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And one of the questions that came in there as well ties into that, which is, will the use of data shift maintenance programs from planned to predictive? And how does the panel feel clients will accept an initial higher maintenance cost? And that's something that we see right across the industry. One thing that I've seen over the 7 or 8 years that I've been working with this business, with your own business, is that the maintenance crews on the ground, like it's very frustrating for maintenance people to go and check things that work, and that's part of planned maintenance. Is let's say there's 100 sensors in a building and there's one faulty one. Like, it's very frustrating for someone to go and check 99 sensors that are working to find that faulty one. So what we've ended up seeing, and I might ask Darren Murphy on this one, like is like what we've ended up seeing from a maintenance side is we've ended up seeing that, you know, that because there's already planned maintenance regimes like on a building now, that might be a day a week, a day a month, or a day a quarter. But as kind of the data and the insights get kind of baked into that maintenance regime, that the actual people on the ground really value that, because most people don't like going to a building to do low value kind of checking of things. They want to go there, the maintenance technicians, and actually replace and fix. And in most cases, the owners tend to have a repairs and R&M budget for the repairs and maintenance. But Darren, on that maintenance side, is there anything that you'd add to that from working closely with your supply chain?
Yeah, are you referring to the technicians already on site, or are you referring to like your BMS contractors coming on? Yeah, look, it's kind of it's a combination of them all. Like, I mean, how like the BMS contractors, and there's another question here as well around BMS software, but just like the data. Have you seen the data
within this help the supply chain with that kind of engagement and better decision making?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose each building is different, and I suppose, look, we all know the buildings out there that have BMSs that are like shoved into the corner as well, and the screen, and no one knows what it does, you know. And but there's also the buildings that have the top, you know, BMS on the market, and you can find that the technicians do like to engage with it, you know, just on previous sites there, even to be able to show value to the client, just from simple changes, you know, just even give an example on a HVAC system, you know, they're interacting with the client and the teams on site, you know, again, going back to knowing the building, what the teams are doing, what times they're working at. So say if you had it already set up initially, the HVAC to run until say 7 p.m. and you found out there was a team in that building that were leaving at, you know, 6:30 or 6:15, you know, the technician is engaging then with the team, the manager of that team, to come up with a schedule to suit the HVAC. And then, you know, he's going back to your obviously BMS engineer to engage how to change that on the system. And once it's done the first time, obviously that technician then has the ownership and the value in his role, that he can go forward and change it in other, you know, areas, or when, for us as a facility company, that's valuable, because we actually did see reduction. So you're talking maybe, you know, like the difference of 15 minutes, 30 minutes over a year, you know, and you have that, then you have that information to be able to take to a client. Then you start to see the small kind of, you know, you talk about repairs, budgets, and changing stuff out. And there's a value on it then for the client and for us as well, you know, working with those systems. So yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And then, and there's another question which then ties into that, the engagement between facility management teams and the existing BMS software, to how it operates from an efficiency viewpoint. And if it took a more proactive status to using the equipment, it could generate savings and efficiency without huge investment. And I might just say on that point that like with our facility managers, I mean, we work with facility managers globally, and you know, it's a job that unless you do it, it's hard to understand just how many challenges there are. Like very often there's one facility manager managing multiple buildings. So therefore, for one facility manager to sit down and interrogate each building management system, when, you know, there's engaging with the tenants, there's facade upgrades. In many cases now there's drills around safety. They have limited time to do it, to get deep into a single BMS. And then there's, you know, very often, like, the best facility managers tend to be the best managers, right? They're like not, you know, it can be a challenge to have mechanical or electrical expertise or BMS, mechatronic experience. So it's the expertise, the time is a challenge, and it's a constraint that's put in the industry. But then it's across a portfolio of assets. Like if you look at J&J, and I might even ask Adrian around it, like to get that kind of expertise across facility management, like, and to empower the team, you know, and how that ties into savings. Like, is there a gap there between the identification and realization of savings? Adrian, is there anything you want to add to it?
Yeah. So I think it's probably come back to the earlier point as well about that data, is the data in. So there's no point in getting 101 different data points unless they're directed to the right end user and in the right format. So I think building that across your facilities management team, having SMEs for different areas, allow that development of your own personnel into whether it's going to be chillers, whether it's going to be compressed air, whether it's going to be BMS. Get them that further in-depth knowledge, and they can analyze that data, and they can see those key areas which need to be addressed. So I think it's across multiple buildings, there's going to be these different challenges, and you just need to direct your teams towards those to get those resolutions. And I think it's definitely for going forward as well. It's more planning for these for any future buildings. Again, it's got to be, I kind of was talking about energy efficiency, energy efficient design. I think there is a fear with project managers when because you know any new capital buildings, there's capital costs and there's time constraints are the key ones. And when they hear energy efficiency design trying to come in, there is that fear it's going to delay, it's going to be an extra cost. But once it's done right, and they can see how it could be done in parallel with the construction, and you can see that those life cycle costs greatly reduced and the benefits that they do bring, I think that'll build that confidence across the industry to move towards that as well.
There's one point, Dave, I'll just chime in on there if you don't mind. I think the question alluded to, is there a degree of complacency in the FM teams? I don't think there ever is. I think the FM teams always want to do a great job and always want to be portrayed as, you know, delivering savings for or delivering value for their clients. I think a lot of times they're hampered with, you know, legacy systems, limited interconnectivity, lack of technical expertise on site. So that I suppose is where we see the opportunity for data analytics in the market, is to help the facility management teams execute on their roles more effectively, really.
No, that's great. So look, just to kind of to really to summarize, I think there really was some it was a great session. There was lots of interesting points made, and I really enjoyed it. Some of the key takeaways for me, like Ken, you're really really around that the IEQ. Do you know what I mean? That was very, very interesting, and really like to you know, the efficiency side of it and the data side of it was really important. Darren, the operation of the facility and how you engage the supply chain and ensure that, you know, the flexibility of the building is really, really important. And it's great, as Adrian, to see the successes and the work that's happened within the J&J estate. It's really, really important that the ISO 50001 to driving that to neutrality, it's a complex puzzle, and digitization is really the key component to it. You know what I mean? So thanks to everyone. Really appreciate it. We are recording of the session, and really appreciate all the attendees joining, and feel free to email any of us. Our contact details are available for follow-up questions. So I might finish there and hand it over and finish up. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye.